Welcome to the debate. You know, what if the most important thing you do for the global economy is not the 40 hours you put in at your job, but the $5 you spend on your morning coffee?
It is incredibly counterintuitive. I mean, we are naturally wired to believe that hard work, the physical lifting in the building, is what actually constructs the world around us.
Exactly. And today we are digging into that exact paradox. Now, for today's discussion, we are actually going to be looking at a video essay that I produced myself recently.
Yeah, and I have to say, the visual quality of the animation turned out really, really good.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So we are just going to converse and follow right along with the video's main points today. We want to keep the language clear, basically at an 8th grade level, so anyone can easily grasp these big ideas.
Right. Keeping it simple, but still tackling the deep stuff.
Exactly. So the core theme of the video is this idea that consumption, which basically means buying, using, and enjoying things, is the true hidden power behind human progress.
Which is a pretty bold claim to make.
It is. We naturally look at a strong human body and assume the visible, flexing muscle is the source of all the power. We see factories, farms, and software engineers, and we think that is the engine.
Because they're the ones physically making the stuff.
Right. But we are exploring a completely different idea today. We are exploring the concept that consumption is actually the hidden heart keeping the entire system alive. I firmly believe that consumption is the active signal that drives all human creation and technological progress.
And, well, I look at the exact same economic history in your video and come to the opposite conclusion. I believe that while consumption is a natural and necessary part of life, the true engine of progress is the underlying production and the division of labor. Treating the mere act of spending as the hero of history is, to me, deeply flawed.
Well, let me lay out the foundation of why the consumption-first perspective is so powerful. It really all comes down to one simple word, which is risk.
Risk? How so?
Think about it. Why would anyone spend a year building a huge factory or inventing a brand new mechanical loom if no one is ever going to consume the result?
Well, they obviously wouldn't.
Right. We often treat consumption like it is just a process of destroying value, like you eat the food until it is gone or you wear the shoes until they fall apart.
Sure, you use things up.
But it is not about destruction. It is a vital living signal. It is the green light that demands the next creation. Adam Smith, who is basically the father of modern economics, recognized this fundamental truth. He said, consumption is the sole end and purpose of all production.
I am familiar with the quote.
If production is the muscle of the economy, consumption is the heart pumping the blood. Without that steady, relentless demand from regular consumers, technology stalls, factories shut down, and society just stops moving forward.
I come at it from a different way. When you really dig into history, elevating consumption to this heroic status creates some very dangerous paradoxes.
What kind of paradoxes?
Well, if consumption is the ultimate goal, then wastefulness suddenly becomes a virtue. Look at the ancient world. You end up having to celebrate ancient stone tombs, like the pyramids, as great economic engines, simply because they used up a lot of resources.
I mean, they did use a lot of resources.
Right, but I just do not buy that as a good thing. True progress does not come from finding clever ways to burn through resources. True progress comes from human ingenuity, specifically the division of labor.
Okay, let's unpack that.
It is the act of organizing workers so they can produce more goods with less physical effort. That is what actually explodes production and lifts humanity out of the mud. Consumption is just the exhaust pipe. You cannot consume what hasn't been produced first.
But let's actually look closely at those historical examples, because they reveal the hidden mechanics of how humans and societies actually evolve. The video spent some time on the pyramids of ancient Egypt for a reason.
Because they are massive and famous?
Because of the logistics. It is so incredibly easy for us to sit here thousands of years later and dismiss them as just massive vanity projects for ego-driven pharaohs. Just a complete waste of time and rock.
Because, well, they literally are stone tombs.
But think about the actual reality of ancient Egypt. The entire society was built around the Nile River, which flooded every single year.
Right, the flood season.
For several months, millions of farmers could not farm the land. You had massive amounts of surplus labor. Millions of strong, capable people with absolutely nothing to do.
Sure, they were out of work temporarily.
If that labor just sits idle, a society stagnates. The pyramids functioned as massive engines to consume that surplus labor.
But let's pause right there. Calling a giant stone monument an economic engine is a massive stretch of the term.
Hear me out. By organizing the massive consumption of stone, food, and engineering effort during those flood months, the society didn't just keep people busy.
What else did it do then?
It built incredible logistical networks. It forced the invention of new mathematics, better barges for moving heavy weight on the water, and advanced masonry. It pushed its artisans to their absolute limits. The sheer act of organizing that massive scale of consumption is what built Egypt into a leading nation.
That is a fascinating way to look at the logistics, and your video animated that beautifully. But I have to push back on the actual efficiency of that choice.
You don't think it was efficient?
Not at all. Yes, organizing the building of a pyramid consumed a staggering amount of labor and food. It certainly got the population busy during the flood season, but look at the difference between consumptive waste and a real capital investment.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning, at the end of the day, after all that brilliant math and moving stones, what do you actually have? You have a mountain of rock sitting in the desert. It does not produce anything new tomorrow.
It produces cultural unity.
Maybe, but not economic value. A true capital investment would be building an irrigation canal that helps you grow twice as much wheat the next year. The pyramid is an artificial, dead-end way to use up labor. It does not represent a true, organic, virtuous cycle.
But an irrigation canal only matters if people are going to actually eat the extra wheat. If there is no demand for the extra food, the canal is just as useless as the pyramid.
People always need food, though. Sure, but let's look at a more modern example from the video that clearly demonstrates this cycle. King Louis XIV of France, the Sun King. Ah, yes, the velvet coats. Exactly. He essentially forced a culture of extreme luxury consumption upon the French nobility. They had to buy the most extravagant coats, the finest jewels, the most incredible furniture. Right, and again, you are talking about an elite minority forcing an artificial economy. You are making nobles buy highly expensive, wasteful luxury goods just to keep tailors and jewelers busy. It kept them very busy. But it is the exact same problem as the pyramids, just with velvet instead of limestone. It is a king forcing spending to create a mere illusion of wealth. It wasn't an illusion at all. It was a highly effective workout for the economy. Think of a human muscle. Okay.
If you do not use your physical energy, if you don't actively push your muscles to their absolute limits with heavy resistance, what happens? They atrophy, they shrink.
Sure, you lose muscle mass.
The forced luxury of the French court acted as a massive, heavy workout for the French economy. Because the nobles were constantly demanding these incredible, intricate garments, the weavers were forced to invent better looms.
I see where you are going with this.
The dyers had to discover richer, longer-lasting colors from all over the world. The consumption was the heavy resistance that built the muscle.
But all of that effort was just to make a fancy coat for a duke. It is still wasteful.
Yes, but look at the underlying mechanism that survived long after the coat was worn out. Because the tailors suddenly had guaranteed recurring demand, they could afford to hire apprentices.
They had a steady income stream.
Exactly. This guaranteed consumption allowed them to pass down knowledge generation after generation. It built a massive, permanent network of highly skilled workers. It built the famous French guilds.
Which were very influential, yes.
That period of extreme organized consumption turned France into the world's leading nation of craftsmanship. Without that elite demand forcing the issue, those artisans would never have taken the financial risk to push their craft to the limit.
I understand the mechanism you are describing. It is a simple chain of events. You demand a ridiculously complex coat, so someone has to figure out the technology to make it.
Right. The demand creates the supply.
But a system relying on a handful of elites to buy luxuries is incredibly fragile. It hits a ceiling very quickly. I mean, you can only sell so many velvet coats before the nobles' closets are full.
That is a fair point.
And frankly, history itself proves that elite consumption is a dead end. To really build the modern world, the global economy had to completely pivot away from kings and nobles.
Exactly. And the video covers this pivot in detail. The focus shifted from the luxury of the few to the abundant consumption of the masses, normal, everyday people.
Right. And how exactly did we get there? This is where the production side of the equation clearly takes the driver's seat.
You think production caused the shift?
Absolutely. The real shift happened because of a revolution in how we worked. We figured out the division of labor. And the rule of history is very clear here. If the division of labor explodes production, a consumer revolution must follow.
Notice the order you just put that in?
Yes. Notice the cause and effect. The division of labor has to happen first.
Let's break down what that actually looks like for the listener, using the factory example from the video.
Let's take a shoe factory in the early days of the Industrial Revolution. Before this, one cobbler makes an entire shoe from scratch.
Start to finish.
Right, it takes him 3 days. The shoe is highly expensive and only the rich can afford it. Then, we introduce the division of labor.
Which changes everything.
We break the process down into 50 tiny steps. One person only cuts the leather. Another person only punches the holes. Another only sews the sole.
They get really fast at their one tiny job.
Exactly. Suddenly, those same workers aren't making one shoe every 3 days. They are churning out 10,000 pairs of shoes a week. Production literally explodes.
It is a massive increase in volume.
And because it explodes, the cost of making each shoe plummets. They become incredibly cheap to buy. Then, and only then, the consumer revolution follows.
Because now regular people can afford them.
Exactly. The masses can suddenly buy shoes. You absolutely cannot have a consumer revolution unless the clever organization of production creates the cheap goods first. Production is the true cause. Consumption is just the automatic effect.
That is an incredibly clear explanation of the factory floor. But I would frame the larger economic reality very differently.
How so?
Yes, the division of labor makes goods more abundant and cheaper. But the entire system you just described only works if the masses are ready, willing, and able to buy all those new goods.
But they will buy them. Human desire is infinite. If things are cheap and available, people will naturally consume them.
But if they don't, the whole system immediately collapses. Let's go back to your shoe factory. You are the factory owner. You decide to divide the labor.
Okay, I am the owner.
To do that, you have to lease a massive building. You have to buy 10,000 pieces of leather up front. You have to hire and train 100 workers.
It is a big investment.
You are taking on a massive amount of financial risk before a single shoe is ever sold. Production explodes, and suddenly you have 10,000 pairs of shoes sitting in a giant warehouse.
Waiting to be shipped.
If the common people do not step up, buy and enjoy those shoes, your factory closes the next morning. You are completely bankrupt.
Well, sure, a business can fail if it misjudges the market.
It is the abundant consumption of the masses that makes the division of labor mathematically possible. When the common people enjoy goods, that is what creates the virtuous cycle. The mass demand acts as an insurance policy for the mass production.
I don't disagree that a factory needs customers to stay open. That is just basic accounting. But you are treating the act of buying as if it is the magical spark of progress.
I believe it is.
It isn't. The magical spark was the genius who figured out how to organize human beings to make 10,000 shoes in a day instead of 10. The organizer is the hero, not the shopper.
I am just not convinced by that line of reasoning because it ignores the actual feedback loop of innovation. Consumption isn't just about clearing out warehouse inventory.
What is it about then?
It is the explicit signal that demands the next iteration. If you're listening to this on a smartphone right now, you're holding the perfect example of this cycle.
The smartphone is a modern marvel of production, yes.
But think about why it gets better every year. When millions of people buy a smartphone, they are sending a massive, undeniable signal to the engineers in the factories.
A signal that there is profit to be made.
Right. That financial signal says, we value this. Make the next version. Make the screen sharper. Make the battery last longer. Without that steady, massive financial demand, technological evolution just stalls out. It becomes a dead end.
But
The heart has to pump the blood to tell the body to keep building new tissue.
that signal is completely useless if society doesn't have the productive capacity to actually answer it.
What do you mean?
Look at it this way. You can put 1 million people in an open field and have them all scream at the top of their lungs, "We want smartphones."
Okay, a funny mental image.
They are sending a massive signal of demand. They have an incredible burning desire to consume. But if they don't have the division of labor, the microchip factories, the supply chains, and the engineering knowledge,
The production side.
right, the production, if they lack that, they are literally just yelling into the wind. Not a single smartphone will magically appear in that field. Production is the actual limiting factor of human progress, not desire. The human desire to consume is easy. We all want a better life. Production is hard.
But we aren't talking about people just wishing for things in an empty field. We are talking about organized, effective demand with actual money. Which brings us to a really profound and perhaps the most complex idea we have to grapple with today.
The final point in the video.
Exactly. The quote goes, "A society that consumes well produces the best." Since we both agree that mass consumption and mass production have to meet to create this cycle, we really need to define what it means for a society to consume well.
To me, consuming well is just a somewhat poetic way of saying a society has finally generated enough surplus wealth that its people can afford to buy what its producers make. It is an indicator of success, not the cause of it.
I think it is much more active than that. Consuming well means having a society where demand is steady, predictable, and incredibly widespread.
Broadly distributed wealth.
Yes, it means wealth is distributed broadly enough that millions of everyday people, not just a few elites, can afford to buy things consistently. When a society consumes well, it provides an unbreakable safety net for inventors and creators.
By guaranteeing the market.
Exactly. It proves that consumption is the ultimate goal. By organizing how it consumes, by ensuring the masses have the ability to buy, a civilization practically guarantees its own greatness. It leaves a permanent green light turned on for innovators.
But a permanent green light at an intersection only helps if you actually have a car with a working engine to drive through it.
That is a great analogy.
Thank you. I look at that phrase, a society that consumes well produces the best, and I just see a mirror. Consuming well is merely a reflection of good, highly efficient production.
Just reflection?
Yes, you cannot consume what hasn't been cleverly brought into existence first. The greatness of a civilization isn't found in how efficiently it organizes its shopping habits. It is found in how it frees up its engineers, its farmers, and its creators to make things that are actually worth consuming.
But if consumption is merely a reflection, just a passive mirror, as you say, why does it function so perfectly as the heartbeat?
Does it, though?
Think back to the Great Depression. The factories were still there, the engineers were still smart, the muscle of production was completely intact, but the economy collapsed because the demand dried up. The heart stopped pumping.
And the heart stopping is a critical failure, absolutely. Blood flowing through the body is essential, but we have to be very careful with this metaphor.
Why is that?
Blood flows to deliver oxygen and nutrients to the muscles so they can do work. In the real economy, the work is making our physical lives better and easier. We don't invent new ways to grow food just so we can have the fleeting pleasure of eating until we are sick or throwing it in the garbage.
Of course not.
We produce food efficiently so we spend less time starving. That frees up our time to build better shelters, write great literature, and cure diseases. The spending of wealth is not the creation of wealth. Consuming well is a sign of a healthy society, yes, but it was the painstaking production of goods that actually lifted humanity out of poverty in the first place.
I hear what you're saying, but let's connect this back to the historical evolution we have been tracking in the video today.
From the pyramids onward.
Right. We move from ancient pharaohs building stone monuments, to kings forcing nobles to buy velvet luxury coats, to everyday working people buying mass-produced shoes and smartphones.
A long historical arc.
In every single one of those eras, the act of consumption was what pushed society to the absolute limits of its current craft, or exploded its technological growth to meet the demand. Only with steady demand can technology evolve without stalling. The demand is the compass. It pulls the technology forward into the future.
It certainly pulls technology forward, but it can only pull it along the tracks that production has already laid down.
That is a very striking way to visualize the relationship between the two. Let's take a moment to summarize where we have landed today, just to make sure we capture the big ideas clearly for anyone listening. We want to keep this summary right at that simple, accessible level.
Good idea.
From my perspective, Looking at the sweep of history in the video reveals a profound truth about human progress. Consumption is the vital heartbeat of a civilization.
Right.
Whether it is an ancient system pushing artisans to build monuments or millions of common people buying everyday goods, the act of consuming is the active, undeniable signal that tells the economy to grow. It is the heart that pumps the blood, mitigating the risk for creators, demanding the next great invention, and ensuring that our technological evolution never stalls out.
And to summarize my view of the exact same history, while buying and using goods is absolutely a necessary and enjoyable part of human life, we cannot mistake the spending of wealth for the actual creation of it.
The making versus the spending.
Exactly. The true hero of the human story is production and the incredible division of labor. It is the clever, back-breaking organization of human effort that makes things abundant and cheap enough for everyone to enjoy. Consumption is simply the natural, inevitable result of all that hard work. We shouldn't confuse the finish line with the engine that actually drove the car there.
Well said. We certainly do agree on a few pivotal realities today, though. We both recognize the incredible, world-shifting power of the consumer revolution.
Oh, definitely.
We both see that when the mass ability to produce meets the mass ability to consume, it creates an undeniable economic cycle that has fundamentally changed how human beings live.
Yes, there is absolutely no denying that the cycle itself is real and powerful. Where we continue to disagree is simply a matter of identifying which part of that cycle is actually sitting in the driver's seat.
Right.
You see consumption as the central heart that leads, commands, and shapes the body of society. I see consumption as the blood that is only capable of flowing because an incredibly strong, productive body is doing all the heavy lifting to keep it moving.
It is a deep, intricate complexity perfectly summed up in that final lingering paradox we discussed. A society that consumes well produces the best.
It is a great thought to chew on.
It leaves us wrestling with this incredibly tangled relationship between making things and using things, between the visible muscle of our daily work and the hidden heartbeat of our daily spending. It forces us to rethink what it actually means to participate in our own economy.
It really does make you look at your everyday, mundane actions through a completely different lens.
It does. And that is exactly the perspective we hope to leave you with today. The next time you buy something, whether it is a pair of shoes, a new smartphone, or just paying $5 for your morning coffee, you might want to pause and ask yourself a question.
A very big question.
Are you simply using something up to satisfy a fleeting desire? Or are you, in that very mundane moment, acting as the heartbeat of civilization, sending a vital, undeniable signal that funds the world's next great creation?
It is a question well worth thinking about.
It is indeed. Thank you for exploring it with us.